Welcome to the Cash Confident Podcast. I'm Brie Sedano, your fearless host, personal finance expert, and the visionary behind the revolutionary Cash Confident community. Oh, hello, everyone. Brie Sedano here talking to you for the Cash Confident Podcast. And today we're talking about big cash influxes. So, most people love like a tax refund, a big month in business. Inheritances get a little complicated because somebody's got to die, but most people, like the money, even if they don't exactly love the circumstances for which it came. We're talking big cash settlements and how to handle these things like a baddie, really, like be able to handle yourself, be able to handle the money. So that's what we're getting into today. Now, I have a whole class that is coming up on how to handle big money. Today in this podcast, I'm going to be teaching you some of what I'm going to teach. I'm going to teach you a little bit of what we're going to do in the class. But if this is a topic that is interesting to you, that you want to be prepared, for big money coming your way, go check out Big Money Baddie. We're going to be doing it soon, actually. So if that's something that you want to do, you can check the show notes for the link to join the entire class about it. All right. So listen, when money is a thing that provides limits, right? So for example, I make enough money that I can freely travel the world, right? I could probably afford economy class flights to literally anywhere if I really wanted to. I could go to Australia. I don't know any place further than that, right? From where I am. And if I wanted to take first class flights, that is in the realm of things that I could imagine, right? I'm just using this as an example. And sometimes I even look at like private jet charters, right? Like where you pay a subscription. And those are out of the realm of where I'm currently financially existing, but they're in the realm of that I could imagine them. They're way far out of my current grasp, but I could imagine them. And then we could think about owning my own private jet and staffing a maintenance crew and pilot. And that's way outside of the realm of where I'm imagining currently, right? And I'm giving you these levels because, if somebody invited me, let's say, to something across the world, I could imagine going. And then maybe I could even imagine flying the first class, but I'm probably not chartering, a private plane. And I'm certainly probably not buying my own private plane. I'm just not there for that, just yet. Wink, wink, right? And with money limits where our imagination goes. Money limits what we think about and what we see as possible. And in a lot of ways, that really serves us because money is a resource. And not that money is a limited resource, but most of us have certain access to money. Like if you're working a job, you make a certain amount of money and, the vast majority of people are not buying private jets. So we're not spending a lot of mental energy thinking about those things. All right. And why I'm pointing this out to you is because when a big cash influx comes in, it can really disrupt the limits of what your mind sees as possible. And so I've been through this with many, many clients. So I'm going to kind of talk you through what this might sound like for you. So let's just say you have a big month in business or an inheritance comes through, or you get a tax refund that really a really big tax refund, or however the money comes in. And then all of a sudden, your brain opens up and starts to see a lot of possibilities. And so your brain's like, all right, so let's just say for the example, let's say you got a big cash windfall, let's call it $50,000. And your brain could be like, oh my goodness, $50,000. We could pay off a big chunk of the house. And then something else will pop in. And it's like, well, you do have that credit card debt. And it's like, well, it is time to buy new cars. Your car is about to shit the bed, friend. And you're like, oh yeah, all right. And then you're like, and we have been wanting new furniture for a long time. And then a different part of your brain is like, but I've been wanting to go on that African safari and see all of the animals. and this is a great opportunity. We're not getting any younger here. And you're like, all right. So you can start looking at all of these possibilities. So what happens is before you had this money, you weren't thinking about paying off your house. You weren't necessarily thinking, you might have been thinking about paying off your credit card debt. That tends to be a place where people spend a lot of mental energy. You probably were not fantasizing about that safari, even though it is on your list. The furniture may be a thing that if you had the money, you would love the upgrade, but maybe it wasn't on your list. And so all of a sudden, it's like your mindscape gets bigger, and now all of these possibilities flood into your brain at the exact same time, but they're all brand new, and they're not things that you've really considered before, and they're not things that are like prioritized against each other. And so what can end up happening is even a big cash windfall can come in, and on the outside it looks really good, and on the outside you feel really lucky. But then when you see all of these new things that you want, and you look at the money and you see that the money's not enough to buy all of the things, you can literally start to think yourself into scarcity. Then you could be like, all right, well, if I pay off the credit card debt, I definitely can't pay off the house. All right. And if I pay off the credit card debt, then I could maybe I could take out a loan for a car, but then I'll have the loan and I might as well just then you start going back and forth, and you're like, I'm going to have this money and then I'm going to end up with a bigger loan than the money. And then you're like, all right, well, if I did the trip and paid off the credit cards, I could use all the money and then I wouldn't have any left. And you're like, well, do I want to have some left? Right. And so this is kind of like the churning. And I hope that you're with me. And if you've ever been in a situation, you're going to understand what I'm talking about, because I've worked with many, many clients on this. All right. And then, so as you see this money as an opportunity, a lot of times there's all of this urgency. Now I'm going to talk. So look at your mind opens up, and now all of these possibilities flood in. So that's one of the things. Now, one of the other things that comes in is a sense of mistrust. Most of us do not trust ourselves with money. And what that sounds like in your brain might be like, well, you better use this money for something good fast, because you're going to spend it all. You better get rid of this money. Like, you better do something good with this money before you spend it all. Right. So you better get rid of this money before you get rid of this money. That's what happens. And so there will be a lot of urgency and pressure on this money to basically get it out of your bank account before you do something stupid with it. Now, that whole frame of thought does not encourage the best decision making. It just does not. And then there are all of the judgments that you have about money start to pop up, because people say things to me like, oh, I got all this money and I had nothing to show for it, which is an interesting thing, because there are a lot of things that are really worth spending money on that would not show. All right. Like, I travel all the time, and once I spend the money on the travel, it's gone. And I think it is a worthwhile investment in my life and my happiness and my life experience. But after the trip is done, all I have to show is a handful of pictures. Right. And to me, I'm just like, okay, like, I would rather have a trip than have something to show, like a new table or something. I don't know. It's just an interesting idea. But people are often saying that, and then they accuse themselves of blowing the money. And, people, there's this idea that if you don't have something to show for the money, like if you paid off debt, for example, you don't have something to show. You already have the things that you bought, but you may feel better. You may be happier. You may have more free cash flow or whatever else. But you just don't have something to show. So anyways, it's just an interesting idea. But that's another really big judgment that plays in, that if you get a big influx, you should have something to show for it. I'm not sure what you're supposed to buy to show people, but so look at your mental framework expands, and then that can be a little overwhelming. Then, you start to meet all your judgments about this money and what you should be doing with it. And that starts to come up. Now, also, money is highly sensational. Money, you get a big chunk of money, and a lot of times people are going to have a lot of money stories. And there may be feelings of all sorts of big feelings that come up in addition, to the self-trust thing that I was just talking about. So a lot of times people get that money, and then if they don't trust themselves, the money actually will generate feelings of fear, feelings of scarcity, feelings of guilt for the past decisions that they've made, feelings of shame, sometimes shame for them being the one that got the money, right? Like one time I had a client who got an inheritance and she felt tremendously guilty to use the money because somebody else died. And I'm like, well, people just don't live forever. It's not like it's not like she killed the lady for the money. She just felt guilty that for her to have this boon, somebody had to die. I'm like, well, yeah, it's valid, right? And so there was all this guilt that showed up, right? That she had to sit with. And so look at there's this huge influx of new information that is now being able to get access to your mental attention. Then there's this huge amount of sensation that comes in. Then we add a layer of pressure. And so this is why most people who win lotteries or really do get like an inheritance or get even as something as simple as a big tax refund, they do these things with their money that then like when they look at it after the fact, they're like, why would I do such a thing? This didn't even make sense. Sometimes people actually, this happens more than you would imagine. People will manifest emergencies to get rid of the money. So if you get a big cash influx and then all of a sudden your washing machine breaks, your dishwasher breaks, your house is leaking, that's surprisingly common. Water leaks are it's a whole vibe. So it's a thing. It's in some of my courses where I talk about it, where sometimes when you're really outside of your comfort zone with money, something in your house, a water leak will spring, and then you'll have to spend the money to fix it. Sometimes I've seen clients where they get a big cash amount of money, and then every single one of their pets needs an emergency vet visit, or their kids all of a sudden are calling to need money for one thing or another. And it's just like they get this money and they feel so uneasy about it that the universe picks up on that and gives them reasons to get rid of it, because the universe is kind of like that. So I just want you to understand kind of what goes into why handling big money can just be so much for your mind and for your nervous system. And I just want to put out there that being able to handle big cash influxes with grace and poise and not freaking out is a skill. It's something that takes practice, and it's something that's really about your mental management, your emotional management, your nervous system management, and your money management. Because all of when your feelings are really riled up and your brain is really processing a lot of new information and you're feeling a lot of pressure to do something, you generally don't make the best quality of decisions. And then that adds to a story, like if you think that you're bad at money and then you get a cash influx, we're probably replaying that. We're probably reinforcing that belief structure. So when it comes to like getting a big cash influx, some of the things that you can do are to really make some space between when the money hits your accounts and when you're going to make any sort of decision with it. Give yourself a little space. If you don't trust yourself with money, maybe talk to a banker and see if you could put the money in a short-term CD where you can see it. You can see it when you log into your bank account, but you don't have access to it for, a month or 3 months or something like that. And I'm not talking about investing it to make money. I'm talking about just taking a little bit of time to get used to it, because that's really what it starts to take. Is we want to give our mind space to really consider all these options. And when we take the pressure off, then our brain can start to chew through, all right, well, what is the highest priority and what would make the most sense? And when you take away the pressure of like, I need to do something fast with this money before I spend it all, right? And you get to work on your sense of self-trust, and you get to have a little space and time, to process those feelings. So that's one of the first things that I suggest for people when they get a big chunk of money, is to just get used to having it. Just get used to it. Look at your bank account every day and work on feelings of safety and work on feelings of self-trust that like, hey, I'm worthy of this money. I deserve this money. I feel safe with this money. Money feels safe with me. And you can, but what that is really you're stretching your nervous system to handle the sensation of having that much potential power at your fingertips. That's really what you're doing. You have to stretch your muscle memory, because that's the hard part. It really is, because I'm going to tell you a story to just demonstrate this. So when I started my business, I had 2 months where I made like $25,000 a month, roughly, and 2 months in a row. And I made $50,000 in, 8 weeks. And that is the kind of money that I was used to at that point in time making in a year. So I made a year's worth of money in 2 weeks or 2 months. And I remember looking at my bank account and there being, I don't know, I think I'd paid all my bills and I'd gotten ahead on some stuff, and I still had more than $26,000 in my bank account. And at that point in time, that was the most money I've ever had, I've ever even seen in my bank account, ever. That was the first time I ever even saw that much money in my bank account. And I will tell you, the physical response in my body was terror. I was so afraid. And this feels a little embarrassing to say out loud and to admit, but this was before I knew everything that I know about how minds and nervous systems work. At this point in time, I was really selling cash flow management programs, money management. I wasn't even in the depths of money mindset yet. I didn't even know everything that I know now. I certainly didn't know enough to lead myself through this situation. And so what ended up happening was I worked, I honored what I'd sold, but I stopped marketing, I stopped selling, and I waited for the money to run out. So I by the time, I had a season of very little money coming in, and I had the money, and that was what I did, because I needed to get rid of that money. I did not know how to handle it for myself. And so I freaked out, and then I got rid of the money. And it's okay. It's a business owner thing. Like, it's all right. I'm not mad at myself about it. I hope you're not mad at me about it. But that was literally what happened. And so where I had good momentum in my business, and if I had pushed, I probably would have had a way different kind of year. I probably would have been, but I couldn't do it. I did not have the muscle memory for that kind of money to be in my life, for that money to be in my bank account. I had to stretch into it. And so I was not a big money baddie at that point. But now when I have a really big month, I handle it just fine, because I've stretched my nervous system. My body does not get afraid. My body doesn't freak out. Not all my self-trust. I've dealt with my self-trust, and so these are the things that really come up when it comes to being able to manage big money. So anyways, the tip that I just gave you about me putting some time distance between when the money comes in and when you're going to have to make any decisions about it. And also, if you don't trust yourself, I would really suggest talking to a local banker. And I would not do any investments if you don't know what you're going to do with this money. I would not buy stocks or bonds. I would not buy mutual funds. I would just put it in a cash style investment. So that way you could see it. That way it could earn, a little smidgy of interest. But the point of this is not to make money. The point of this is to give yourself time and space between when the money comes and when the decisions need to be made, and get used to having the money and learn how to be a person who has that kind of money. That's what I would suggest first. Now, some of the other things that we want to do is really start to examine our priorities, because when people get a big cash influx, a lot of times what they do is they want to pay off all of their debt. And while I admire that as a sentiment, like, oh, I'm going to do the responsible thing and I'm going to get rid of all this credit card debt, I'm going to tell you that I've been working with people on their money for a long time. And what I find is it doesn't work, because then we took one broken comfort zone. So you have a broken comfort zone around the amount of money you have in your bank account. And now we have another broken comfort zone around credit card debt, because credit card debt is a comfort zone. We generally have a certain amount of credit card debt. And oftentimes paying off credit card debt a little bit more slowly gives you time to adjust that comfort zone. So this is what can happen, and this happens a lot, and there's nothing wrong with the people that this happens to, but if we can avoid it, we would want to avoid it. So somebody will get a big cash influx. Then they'll pay off all their credit card debt, but they still have all the habits and the mindsets that accrue credit card debt. And now they don't have any money because, well, they used it to pay off their credit card debt. Then we fast forward a couple of years and their credit card debt is back to where it was. And then they also don't have savings, right? And they still don't know how to have money. They still don't know how to have money. And so even though they did pay off their credit card debt, the credit card comes back and they still don't know how to be in possession of large sums of money. And so they keep getting into credit card debt, right? Because a lot of these things is not just about practical money management. It's about the energetics. It's about the mindset. It's about the habits. It's about the human. We have to prioritize. All right, what are we doing here? And we want to really be looking at those priorities from, what am I trying to create? What is the lifestyle that I'm trying to create? What am I doing here? Right? Because a lot of times the money management, where that says I'm going to just I'm going to just pay off my credit card debt. Then 2 seconds later, they'll say, all right, and then I'll have money to save for the down payment on the house. I'm like, well, you already had the down payment for a house, or you already had the money to do whatever, and you chose to pay off your credit card debt. Right. And it's just because they didn't think it through. And it's mostly because there's this pressure to do something with the money fast, especially if you've never had this much money. So setting up some priorities, and your mind is going to take a minute to process all that information. And then there's some emotional clearing that's generally going to need to be done. When you have a lot of money, it can trigger a lot of big feelings around subconscious loyalties, around fears, around a sense of belonging, a sense of mistrust with your friends and relatives. Like people who win the lotto will report things like, I couldn't trust anybody. I got all this money, and then all of a sudden I couldn't tell if people wanted to be with me or they wanted my money. They couldn't tell. Right. And that's, those are big feelings, and we have to learn to be with those and process those and be able to work with this new reality that we have. And then there's like the practical money management. All right, well, what's the tax situation going to be like? What's going to be the way that I want to multiply this money, right? Invest this money, turn this money into more money. How am I going to do that? Or do I want to just pay off debt? So then there's the practical money management piece. And so all of these things kind of come together to be like, this is why, like I'm saying to you, being able to skillfully handle big money like a boss, like a baddie, is harder than you'd imagine. But when you get that money and you freak out and you lose it all, you also, again, lower your self-trust. So that way, the next time the opportunity even comes, sometimes you even shy away from it. And I'll tell you, for me, it took me a long time to get back to those $25,000 months after I had that money. And then I freaked out and I couldn't handle it because my nervous system literally couldn't handle it where I was. I was not there yet. And so I had a few really big months, and then my income dropped and I had to really work myself back up to that. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that if I had known these things that I know now and that I'm, offering to teach to people, I'd be better off financially and business wise, because I lost a lot of momentum when my body couldn't handle the amount of success that I was having. So anyways, I hope you liked a couple of the ideas that I gave you in the tip to just get used to having the money. That, 30, 60, 90 days of having to get used to it and taking the pressure off really allows so much space for your mind to just chew over its new options, and for your body to be able to get used to it before there's any pressure to make any big decisions. So if you want to learn the rest of what I know, and you want to come to the Big Money Baddie Masterclass, the link will be in the show notes, and the link will be all over my socials. And if you need to send me an email or send me a DM on Facebook or Instagram to get the link to register, just ask and I'll send it to you. We are doing that masterclass. Give me just a second. I'm going to pull up my calendar so I can be right about the date. When this is coming out, we'll be doing the class on March 9th, I believe. Now, listen, I'm recording this podcast the beginning of February, so sometimes stuff changes. So, follow me on the socials for all of it. But right now it's scheduled for March 9th, which is about a week from when this podcast will go live. All right. So I love you. I appreciate you. I know that it's tax refund season, and I just want you to be able to handle your big money like a baddie. I want you to feel good with yourself. I want you to be building wealth. I want you to trust yourself with your money and all of that good, juicy stuff. So I love you. I appreciate you. And I will talk to you next week. Bye.